today at the PAPSS Ghana Roadshow. We are so happy to welcome you here. So without spending so much time, because we are already wasted 30 minutes, I would like to invite on stage my CEO, Mr. Michael Balo, to make his remarks.
Let me thank especially the Ghana banks for their support. The very first, again, I'd like to go back memory lane. 1963, in the lead up to the formation of the AU, when there were discussions around how do we set up this structure, okay, and what is the state of affairs of the continent. Should we bring the whole of Africa together, as was canvassed by our very own Kwame Nkrumah, or should we, first of all, create RECs, use the regional economic blocks, bring the countries together, let them start cooperating, and then eventually we can now bring the continent together. And then there was a third school of thought that said, leave all countries to be standalone, let them be fully independent on their own, and so on. Of course, the second school of thought that said, let us create these regional economic blocks, bring countries into groups, and then eventually we can come together, won the day. But today, we see the vision of Kwame Nkrumah. If the continent had pursued the vision as he had espoused, in 1963, the continent would have moved much further. And right here in this room, maybe it's fate, maybe it's destiny that brought us back to this room. About this time, January of 2022, we launched PAPSS, although we were facing this way, in this very room. So once again, we are back to this very room, and it looks like it is destiny. The very first transaction, the very first commercial transaction of PAPSS was a transaction that originated out of this market to Nigeria. And again, I think it originated from Ghana Commercial Bank and terminated in First Bank of Nigeria. So once again, it's as if each time Nigeria tries to catch up with Ghana, Ghana somehow finds a way to be one step ahead. So once again, thank you. So it's important each time we gather to remind ourselves why we are doing what we are doing. Why is it important to create this payment system that will drive trade? And I always say that every single day, we live our lives, we create value, different types of value, whether it's physical, whether it's digital, whether it's virtual, but we create value. We consume some of those values that we create, okay? And the rest we trade with the next person. Whether we are producing food, whether we are producing videos, anything that we create as value, we consume and we trade with the next person. Now, that is the cycle of life. But without payments, trade never happens. And anything that affects payments will affect trade. If you look at the concept of a market has buyers and sellers. It has rules for buying and selling. It has things like logistics and so on, but then it has an acceptable means of payment. Africa, having been balkanized, we have not been able to have that single acceptable means of payment. So with the coming on stream of the AFCFTA, it became clear that we as a people, we needed a payment system that we as a people can control, that we as a people can govern. The payment systems that we have today were not supporting Africa's trade. First of all, there was the issue of costs. If you look online and you look at some of the most expensive payment corridors, they are here on the African continent. So you ask yourself, why should the poorest be paying the most for transacting? Then you talk about delays. Payments sometimes could take 3 to 7 days, and these are times that business people require to be turning around their inventory, and they are spending it confirming payments. Today, when you travel from Lagos to Accra, you don't first of all go to New York and then come back to Accra. When we ship goods, we don't ship goods to New York and bring it back to Accra. When we talk on the phone, we don't talk to an operator in New York who now connects us to Accra. Why should money move that way? So because trade is at the center of the prosperity of nations, a trading continent is a prosperous continent, and Africa is so richly endowed. Africa is endowed. Just that we ship mostly raw materials, we don't even know what exists even in different parts of Africa. Sometimes, if you follow the trajectory of certain goods, you'll find that country A in Africa, which could actually be a neighboring country, is buying products from somewhere in Europe, and what is happening is that a middleman just sits in Europe, he buys, and he may not even add any value to the product. He sells the same product to another African country. And part of the problem is that it was easier to pay counterparties elsewhere around the world than to pay each other. Now, with every payment system, there will be slow starts, there will be teething issues, and I can assure you that we have seen our own fair share of those teething issues. But what I'm hoping that you will take away from this meeting, beyond all the technical presentations, is that spirit that, look, this payment system, we will make it work, okay? And as it works, it becomes a credit to us, and it becomes a tool which we can control. Sometimes when I speak, people ask me about, oh, okay, what do you think about so-and-so sanction? Does PAPSS, would the West or whoever be happy with the payment system? And I said to them, I have never involved in geopolitics. What is interesting to me is how do we drive trade on the continent? So we're not interested in how it affects here or affects here. No. To the extent that we're able to put in place a payment system that supports the growth of Africa, then we're satisfied. So again, if you leave me, I can talk for 1 hour. So I'll try to cut it short. One of the things that we've seen is working with the central banks and working with you guys and the commercial banks, we continue to get input that continues to feed into the shaping of this payment system. And ultimately, we will build a payment system that is fit for purpose. So today, we'll also be sharing with you some of the new enhancements that we have had, given the feedback that we have received from a number of participants. And we are hoping that with our new commercial bank settlement model, which my colleagues will be speaking to today, that we can actually have more options, which will help us to achieve our collective goal. So once again, thank you so much for coming, and welcome to this roadshow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Balu, CEO of PAPSS. Another round of applause, please, for Mr. Balu. Thank you. So, we couldn't organize this roadshow without the support of our key stakeholders, our key partners in Accra. Let me mention the AFCA, the AFCFTA, the Bank of Ghana, represented today by Dr. Seto, and also some of the commercial banks that are here today. So we also want the end customers, the traders who are here in the room today, to listen to them, because they also have some clear message to share with you, and they also share our vision of implementing this payment system. So I would like to invite on stage Mrs. Emily, Emily Doria, Director of Digital Trade of the AFCA. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it, so she's represented by one of her colleagues. So Mrs. Beatrice, yes, Mrs. Beatrice Shato, Head of Trade in Service Division.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I stand on the same protocol as Mike has stood on. Good morning to you all. It's a great pleasure to give this goodwill message at this first PAPSS Roadshow of the year on behalf of the AFCFTA Secretariat. First, I would like to congratulate the PAPSS team for the significant progress made since the launch of PAPSS in January 2022, including the number of country deployments and partnerships with central and commercial banks, as well as other relevant players. I would also like to congratulate the government of Ghana on the recent successful PAPSS transactions recorded in the past few months. We would like to see more of these in many more countries across the African continent. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the operationalization of PAPSS is critical to facilitate the expected increased volumes in cross-border payments under the AFCFTA. PAPSS is likely to have a significant impact on the implementation of the AFCFTA agreement and the African economy at large. It will boost trade and economic integration in Africa by providing a more efficient and cost-effective way to make cross-border payments, making it easier for businesses to trade across borders. Implementing PAPSS will increase trade and economic integration, reduce business costs, and improve financial inclusion in Africa. With PAPSS, African traders and investors will benefit from a simplified process that reduces the costs and complexities of foreign exchange for cross-border transactions between African markets. The traders and investors will also benefit from instant and secure cross-border payments capability to their African customers. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are heartened that PAPSS works in collaboration with the AFCFTA Secretariat to boost intra-Africa trade through increased volumes of cross-border payments. The collaboration between PAPSS and the AFCFTA Secretariat is essential for the entire African economy, across all sectors, goods, services, investment, capital, whatever. By working together, we can help reduce trade risks and transaction costs, make it easier for businesses to do business with each other, and boost economic growth in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude my opening message by reiterating that the AFCFTA Secretariat has been entrusted by the AU heads of state and government with implementing the common vision of the AFCFTA to build the Africa we want. Banks play a vital role in supporting the achievement of this shared vision. For example, banks play a crucial role in increasing trade by providing financial services that facilitate the movement of goods and services across borders. These services include letters of credit, trade finance, and cross-border payments. In addition, as the African economy becomes interconnected, the collaboration between banks and other financial service providers must grow. banks should strive to collaborate with each other and with other financial institutions to develop new ways to increase trade. We need to see new services, new products emerging from the compendium of products that banks offer. For example, banks must work together to create common platforms for cross-border payments, reducing costs and making it easier for businesses to make payments and making trade, goods and services much more efficient and secure. As such, we, on the part of the AFCFTA Secretariat, and I can speak for PAPSS and Afreximbank, would like to see active and meaningful participation and support of all banks across the continent to ensure that PAPSS provides the AFCFTA single market with an instant, secure, low-cost payment and settlement system. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, this roadshow is a great opportunity for us to connect and partner, to share our products and services with you and among you, and we are eager to hear your feedback on this vital tool for Africa's development. Thank you again for your kind attention. Enjoy the roadshow.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Beatrice Shato. Another round of applause, please. Thank you. So I'm about to invite I'd like to call him one of our champions. He is really championing PAPSS, and we at PAPSS are very happy about it. But before I give him the floor, I would like to play a quick video. Is it ready? Yes, please. So, as you can see, in this video, we collaborate with a painter, he's Chukwu, he's also Ghanaian, and we are happy to sometimes, for some of our champions, like the governor of Bank of Ghana, to give this present to our champion. So I would like to invite Dr. Seto Amidiku, Director of Payment Bank of Ghana, on stage for his remarks. Dr. Seto.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Mike, I want to tell you a story. You remark about this particular room. I could recall in 2016 when we decided to pass the Payment System and Services Act 2019, which currently guides the payment ecosystem in Ghana. We happened to hold a stakeholder meeting in this particular room. I think there's something unique about this room. And in 2016, I'm sure those who have been in the banking industry for some time now can recall that nobody knows anything about payment system in Ghana. And those times when the Bank of Ghana was pushing mobile money. I could recall, I particularly have to meet the executive council of the Ghana Association of Bankers to explain to them that mobile money is not coming to take their work. They rather need to collaborate. And they never understood. So in this room, we had representatives from Attorney General, the bankers, or other key stakeholders. We met here to go through the electronic money issuers guidelines and the agent guidelines. It was in this same room that we concluded that we have to pass the Payment Systems and Services Act that has led to the proliferation of the fintech that we are all seeing, that has created a lot of jobs for the youth and a lot of companies that have entered the fintech space. Now, at that time also, we have very few banks that really appreciate what we were talking about. Technically, with all my years in the central bank, one thing I have now established is that change is inevitable. Whether this generation is ready to embrace it or not, the next generation will embrace it. And the best way to move forward is to embrace change and adapt and use it for the good of society. Now, that led to the passage of the Payment Systems and Services Act, which now we have all now seen the beauty of payment in Ghana. I'm sure most of you can be here and pay your electricity bill, pay your water bill. Some years back, normally it's only on Saturday. Those of us who are working people have to be in line. I, for one, I found myself in the Legon ECG to be in line to be paying my electricity bill. Water bill, we have to even be like after begging GWSC, Ghana Water Storage Corporation, those days, to pay our water bills. But I could be in Egypt, now pay my water bill, pay my electricity bill, move money from my staff account, transfer to my son in school, anywhere. And that is the beauty of change. If you look at the data available to us, as Mike rightly underscored, intra-Africa trade, partly between 2015 and 2018, is hovering around 15–16%. If you compare to Asia and Europe, which are in the region of 50s, 80s, 70. What that means is that we need, as a continent, to do something about this. And that will create opportunities, again, to those willing institutions which want to be early movers. And I can assure you, the banks we are seeing in the, on the stand there, they will never regret the decision they took to be early movers. I can draw lessons from the mobile money. Those days, without mentioning names, we have only 3 banks that were ready to open their balance sheet for mobile money. And I could also recall, in 2007, when Bank of Ghana fully operationalized GIPS, we called a meeting. I was at that meeting, then was my governor, Paul Akwa. We wanted to give GIPS to the banking industry free to manage. There was a heated debate on the 5th floor of the Monetary Policy Committee room, to the extent that it nearly resulted in a blow coming from some of the managing directors who are now on retirement. I always say that we have a unique opportunities, those of us working down here, to leave a legacy so that when we are no more, we can be proud and say that these are the things that we have left behind and that are working for society, and we are also benefiting from it. They oppose ownership of gifts. And today, as I'm speaking, I have had several letters from the association pleading to own gifts. What all these things are telling us is that when changes, when they come, we should be ready to accept. Because even the human race, you are born, you crawl, you walk, you stand on yourself, you start working, you will decline, you go back to your original state and leave this world. It's a fact, that a phase that all of us will go through. That is why if you see in a developed world, they believe in leaving a legacy. Rather than in developing countries, we believe in possession. In a developed world like the UK, Canada, they believe that when they leave this world, the purpose that God has created them for, they must leave a legacy. And that legacy are the things that we are benefiting from. This light that we are seeing was done by someone through intensive pain. The mic I'm using was done by someone through intensive pain. So, looking at all the things that I have said, PAPSS, we will learn by doing. There will be mistakes. We will learn through the road. There will be challenges. We will learn. But I believe the next 10 years, PAPSS is going to be one of the matured institutions that will rival most of the institutions in the international space. If you take the global financial crisis, the recent Russia-Ukraine war, and the COVID-19, the challenges that developing countries and emerging economies have gone through, that will tell you that Africa, we have a unique opportunity to create our own in order to move this continent out of poverty. And I strongly believe that even if those of us sitting in this room, we don't conform to the revolution that took place in the mobile money that I talk about, there will be a next generation that will come and do that. I know that even as we have commenced the PAPSS, there are people, they are naysaying. There are people who are saying that we can never do it. I want to draw an analogy from the Bible, Nehemiah. When Nehemiah said that we shall build the wall, there were 3 guys who said it can never happen. There were 3 guys who said it can never happen. And there were others who were silent and they said within themselves that it can't happen. But the vision Nehemiah had materialized. In every good thing that you are doing, automatically you get opposition. I could recall when I established the payment system department in Bank of Ghana in 2015, July, and we introduced mobile money. I always tell my staff, I even had a situation where senior members of staff told me that when mobile money collapses, it collapses on my head, not Bank of Ghana. But the good thing is that when the fruit comes, everybody tries to be part of that fruit and say that they created it. And I believe Mike and his team, they are leaving a legacy. What we need from the banks is that, as I have already stated, let's be aware that we are going to face a lot of difficulties on our journey to operationalize PAPSS. The current payment system that we have in Bank of Ghana, or we have in Ghana, or the structures that we have laid in Bank of Ghana, they didn't come out of just partying. They came out of a lot of pains that we went through. In the same way, perhaps we are going to have a lot of challenges. Nobody promises anybody that it's going to be a rosy thing. There are issues that will come out with in terms of transaction costs, transaction failing, transaction whatever. They are part of the process. They are preparing us to overcome the challenges that we will face the next 5 years. So I will call on all the banks that are not on the board. My governor has given a letter of no objection to all the banks. What you need to do is to write to us at the Payment System Department. We'll review your request and let you go ahead. I don't want that time, I'm sure, when PAPSS become operational, I will be on retirement, okay? I don't want to hear some banks saying that, oh, this PAPSS things is benefiting Bank A, B, C, D. Can Bank of Ghana come up with a policy to level the playing field so that some of the banks who can get some of the trade? Just like us, we have seen in mobile money. There were some banks that they were not even holding any portfolio of mobile money or float balances. But now these same banks are now pleading with the central bank that, can we also take part of the float? But in 2016, when we were calling on them to come and take the float, they said they were not interested. In the same way, as we have started, I have said it already, this room, there's something unique about it. I must admit, there's something very unique in terms of the payment system. So I encourage all banks to take the necessary step and be on the platform. It will give you additional income, diversification. You don't rely on only corporate and retail banking that we know traditionally. The world is changing. It will never wait for us. Thank you.
I think I mentioned it. He's really the champion of PAPSS in Ghana, as you can see. So a round of applause from Dr. Seto. Thank you so much, Dr. Seto. So I'm going to invite one of our partners. Now we are going to the private sector, so a commercial bank. So I myself am very happy about the collaboration that we had so far. They were the first bank in Ghana to do the first live transaction. They also the first bank to finalize the technical integration into our system. And even now, as you can, maybe some of you have seen online and even on other materials, the communication they put out to the market just to promote PAPSS. So I would like to invite on stage Mr. Kofi Adomako, CEO of Managing Director of Ghana Commercial Bank, who unfortunately couldn't make it, but he's represented by one of his colleagues who will make the remarks on his behalf. So Mr. Andrews Osei, Head of Transaction Banking, please come on stage.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. All protocols observed. We apologize for the MD's inability to be here. He was caught up in an emergency, and so he was not able to represent. He would have loved to be here. He sends his warm regards. So he has a speech that I'll be reading on his behalf. We are extremely honored for the opportunity given to share the remarkable journey of GCB Bank in this room. In implementing the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPSS. We believe this is an instrumental platform which will drive the economic growth, development, and integration across the continent. As we may all have come to realize by now, PAPSS is a remarkable financial infrastructure facilitating secure and efficient cross-border money flow. It stands as a transformative force aligning with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and uniting over 1.4 billion people in a single market. At GCB, we take immense pride in being among the pioneering banks in Ghana to embrace PAPSS. Since our first successful transaction on the 3rd of March, we have processed over 50 transactions, symbolizing our commitment to driving change and progress. Our proactive approach has positioned us as forerunners in PAPSS implementation, making us the first bank to achieve technical integration, as was mentioned by, and also as acknowledged by the CEO of PAPSS. The leadership role reaffirms our dedication to empowering Ghana and other African nations to embrace PAPSS benefits fully. PAPSS promises to revolutionize intra-Africa trade, dismantle barriers, and foster seamless business interactions by simplifying and reducing costs associated with cross-border transactions. PAPSS paves the way for increased economic growth and development through the continent. However, the impact of PAPSS extends beyond the economic realm. Its potential for social benefits is significant. By enabling the swift and affordable transfer of funds, PAPSS empowers individuals to support their families and friends across border, driving poverty reduction. Furthermore, by promoting financial inclusion, PAPSS opens doors to previously inaccessible financial services, fostering economic empowerment for all. GCB Bank remains resolute in our commitment to support the successful implementation of PAPSS. We firmly believe that PAPSS represents a vital tool for the future of Africa trade and development, and we are honored to lead the way in Ghana. We would like to urge each and every one of you here to rally behind the implementation of PAPSS. Together, we can shape the future of Africa's trade and development. Let us seize this remarkable opportunity to unlock the full potential of PAPSS and drive meaningful change across our continent. I eagerly look forward to collaborating with each one of you, united in our shared goal of making PAPSS a resounding success. Together, we can forge a prosperous and integrated Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew from GCB. Another round of applause, please. Thank you. So, I think we are going to start now the presentation, the introduction of our new settlement model. And to do so, we prepare a quick short video that will provide more information, but of course, my colleague Monica will also provide more details. Wait, please, can you play the video?
Accelerating PAPSS rollout in Africa. Introducing PAPSS Commercial Bank Settlement Model. Since its launch in January 2023 in Accra by His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana, PAPSS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, has been on a journey across the continent, engaging with African central banks and financial institutions to make them adopt this groundbreaking platform that will save Africa more than $5 billion annually in payment transaction costs. During his journey, PAPSS successfully achieved the participation of 9 central banks, 4 national switches, 12 strategic partners, and more than 65 commercial banks. However, this is still far from our goal of impacting intra-African trade at a continental level. As a result, PAPSS is introducing today to the market the Commercial Bank Settlement Model, a new model that is more efficient, more flexible, and suitable to central banks, commercial banks, and to the end customers who will benefit from more payment options. So, what are the benefits for the banks? No transaction value limits. Set the exchange rate. Settlement handled by the banks. Payments in local currency or USD. Settlement in bilateral net basis at 11 GMT. Settlement support through overdraft facility. If you want to become a PAPSS participant and take advantage of the possibilities offered by the Commercial Bank Settlement Model, contact us now on www.papss.com.
So we introduced this new settlement model during the Afreximbank annual meeting on Monday this week. We also signed during that ceremony MOUs with Pan-African group banks. So today we are still in the market in Accra, so we also wanted to have a deeper conversation, presentation of what this settlement model is about. And I will invite now my colleagues Monica Orao, Head of Product and Business Development, to do this presentation. Monica, please.
A very good morning to you all. I stand on all protocols observed. As the speakers before have mentioned, it is very important for us to be here in Ghana today. Ghana is a very key market for us as one of the countries that have led the way when it comes to PAPSS. We're here because we have been monitoring the activity, the PAPSS activity in this country and with the commercial banks. We are listening to you, we continue to listen to you, and what we present to you this morning is really just part of the feedback we have received from the commercial banks as well as their customers. So without much ado, I will take you into the commercial bank model, and as I do that, I'll explain how it works and the background for how we reach this point. So as I begin, maybe just a kind reminder about what we're doing at PAPSS. So we are sitting as a central financial market infrastructure. This morning you heard from our CEO with regards to the fragmentation of the payment systems across the continent. And this is one of the key problems we are solving by sitting in the middle to be able to connect all the different payment systems and make payments across Africa as seamless as possible. So we have been designed to use local currencies. We are also going to extend this, and this is because we have heard that there's a lot of feedback from customers today also wanting to extend this to foreign currency as well, and I'll speak about this as we move through the presentation. What is key is actually settlement, and since our launch, we have been doing settlement with central banks, and we would like to extend this to commercial banks as well. So typically, a payment in PAPSS today, it starts with the sender. So for example, a sender in Accra can instruct their commercial bank in the local currency, which is the Ghanaian cedi. That payment comes to us at PAPSS. And so far, the central bank, the Bank of Ghana, has been providing the foreign exchange rate for that transaction. If that transaction is going to Nigeria, for example, say a bank in Lagos, then through that rate, the bank in Lagos will know how much they want to pay their customer in Naira. And today, this takes place as a real-time transaction. Our SLA to the market is 120 seconds, but what we have seen from the transaction so far is it can be even down to 7 seconds. So what is our value proposition with what we are offering to you today? The first one and the key one is ownership. PAPSS, as you have heard, is a system by Africans for Africans. The second is the governance. So you heard from the Director of Payments at Bank of Ghana this morning. We have from the beginning been governed by central banks, and we continue to do so. In fact, in coming and developing this model, we worked collaboratively, not just with the commercial banks, but also with the central banks. Third, we continue to maintain and keep international standards, both in terms of messaging and security. And finally is collaboration. So we recognize and we acknowledge the key role that existing payment systems are playing today, and we work to collaborate with them rather than to compete with them. So this is our fast-growing network. You saw that in the video today. I think what I'll highlight is since our commercial launch, we have started to move out of the West African Monetary Zone into East Africa through Djibouti, as well as Southern Africa through Zambia and Zimbabwe. We have some of the key switches in this region, including GIBS in Ghana, as well as NIBS in Nigeria, GAM switch in the Gambia, and our switch in Rwanda. Our strategic partnerships are very important to us. Our MC, who is our head of marketing and digital communications, he just emphasized a key event that took place earlier this week, where the group banks across Africa also signed to join this commercial bank model. So they're some of our strategic partners in terms of rolling out the model. And then finally, the commercial banks, as I mentioned, we have over 60 commercial banks today, from Pan-African banks to indigenous banks here in Ghana, as well as a few international banks. So governance still remains key to us. In implementing this new commercial bank settlement model, the central banks, who have traditionally been playing an oversight and settlement role, will now play a mostly regulatory and supervisory role. They will continue to sit in our governance organs and determine the direction that PAPSS is moving. So just to highlight for the benefit of everybody in the room, we start with the highest regulating organ, which is the PAPSS Governing Council, where all the central bank governors, including the governor of Central Bank of Ghana, sits. Then we have the Payment Oversight Committee, and in fact, we had Bank of Ghana come and carry out an assessment on PAPSS against the principles of financial market infrastructure, so just benchmarking us against international standards across the world. We have our PAPSS Management Board, which includes the industry captains across Africa, helping us with the strategy. And we have our management team who are here today, starting with our CEO and Deputy CEO as well. So we can deep dive now into the settlement at PAPSS and what we are proposing to the market here. So typically in PAPSS, your customers or the end customers will transact in the local currencies. And they do this through their commercial banks. So they'll either come to your branches. I think in some cases, they can do this through internet banking and mobile banking. So once they do that, then the central bank has provided settlement funds. They provide these settlement funds in dollars, and this is to facilitate settlement, essentially the movement of funds from one country to another. So the way we look at settlement is we need to convert the transactions that have been done in local currency by your customers into the settlement currency for the final settlement. And then we also need to help to manage the liquidity. And we do this through a net settlement position. Essentially, we would look at all the transactions that have gone from one country and been received by that country and determine the net position that needs to be settled in the settlement currency at the end of the day. So settlement takes place both at local and foreign currency level. So we recognize that different African countries are at different levels, and because of this, we have developed different settlement models. So in Ghana, I'm sure you're very familiar with the central bank model because that's what you have been using today. We are introducing the commercial bank settlement model, but aside from that, we also have an ability to do this through Afrexim Bank, and this is on a case-by-case basis. And we also have the ability in countries where, say, a central bank does not have the capacity to settle, or they don't have a settling system, such as the real-time gross settlement system, then they can elect to have a commercial bank do this. And we have markets where that has happened as well. So that brings me to what we are here to speak to you about today, which is the commercial bank settlement model. Essentially, what this means is the commercial bank will provide funds for settlement at the end of the day. So I'll deep dive a bit into this. So how would this work? So as I mentioned, today what happens with PAPSS is the commercial bank simply needs to provide funds in local currency and their customers transact in local currency, so in the Ghanaian cedi. And then they leave the settlement to the central bank, the Bank of Ghana, which is done in dollars. So with the commercial bank settlement model, what would happen is today at Afrexim Bank, where the central bank provides settlement funds, the commercial bank would play this role. So just taking an example, you would have pre-funding. So in this case, you have two commercial banks. They have pre-funded. So one has pre-funded $500,000. The other one has provided $200,000 for settlement. Because they are settling, this then gives them the opportunity to provide the foreign exchange rates for the transaction. And this is one of the key feedback that came back to us from the commercial banks. Because of the way the foreign exchange moves dynamically in the market, then rather than having the central bank provide those rates, they would like to be able to provide that. So this model gives the commercial banks the opportunity to provide the exchange rate for the transaction. So once they've done that, then their customers, I think at the lower part of the screen, can then carry out the transactions. So we've given examples here, say there are transactions coming in from a commercial bank in Kenya. They still continue to come in the local currency, but using the rates, we're able to determine how much the commercial bank in Ghana will receive in cedi. And that is a feature that will also be available to you and your customers. At any point in time that they do a transaction, they'll be able to see how much the customer on the other side will be able to receive. So similar to what we do for the central banks, today, at the end of the day, we'll determine the net position that will be settled. So we'll look at all the transactions that have gone from one bank and all the transactions that have been received by the bank, and then we'll determine the net position. So this is what they will settle. And this is also another value addition that we are bringing to the banks and by extension their customers, that they will only be settling the net position rather than the full amount of transactions that their customers do. So just to highlight the benefits, so first and foremost, as PAPSS, we do not have transaction limits. However, different markets will set, or the regulator will set transaction limits, and we expect those to be complied with. But we also highlight that if you provide settlement funds, then you can determine the extent to which your customers can transact. The second is the ability to set the exchange rate. This will give the capacity to deal with any volatility that's happening with the rate in the course of the day. The third is the commercial banks will settle the position for their customers' transactions. They'll do this once a day and as a net position. The payments can be in local currencies, and in the case where your customers have specifically requested to do payments in dollars, then there's an ability to do this as well. Settlement is done bilaterally once a day, 11 GMT, and we continue to be available 24/7 for any transactions. And finally, at PAPSS, through Afrexim Bank, then you can also, as a bank, apply for an overdraft facility as part of the settlement guarantee. So I will conclude with our offering. So this is what PAPSS looks like and will look like with the commercial bank settlement model compared to the global payment systems. So in terms of speed, we are an instant payment system, and as I mentioned, we will continue to do and to carry out transactions within our SLA to the market, which is 120 seconds. In terms of costs, we have determined that we are still able to do this, reducing the costs significantly. So on the PAPSS level, you would not be charged as a commercial bank more than $25. In terms of currency, we are extending the currency to not just cover local currencies, but also USD. For security, we are meeting the best international standards, both in terms of information technology and data protection. So that's ISO 27001 and ISO 27701 as well. We do an automated payment validation, so we guarantee that the payment is always received to the beneficiary. We do not charge for this service. We also carry out training to all your staff. Again, we don't do this at a cost, and we provide personalized 24/7 care. So with that, I will come to the end of the presentation. I'm not sure if I will invite the MC before we go into the Q&A.
Thank you, Monica. A round of applause, please, for Monica Waro. So, Monica, before I give the floor to the banks, our partners who are here, the traders, I have a quick question. You know, I like to say, as a layman, right? I don't know, I'm not coming from this bank business, big bank sector, right? As the traders, some of the traders that we have in the room. So in one sentence, can you just explain the commercial bank settlement model to them? The bank, obviously I know they know, but for us, please.
Okay, so essentially, how I would explain the commercial bank model is that it gives control to the banks, and by doing that, it allows them to give a better offering to their customers. So as a customer, your bank, if you are trading or carrying out import or export, your bank should be able to give you a flexible foreign exchange rate for any transaction you're doing from Ghana to another country. It should also do this instantly, so that if you are trading a certain product, the person on the other side is waiting for the payment, or you're waiting for the payment, you should be able to receive this in a very short period of time, as I mentioned, in about 120 seconds. And then finally, you should always be able to know that the payment is received by the party on the other side, as part of maintaining that relationship. And that's something that we are working with your banks to do.
Is that clear? Is that clear? Thank you, Monica. So I would like now to give the floor to the audience. Please, this is the moment for you to ask your question. She's the head of product and business development, so she's in charge. So feel free to ask any of your questions. We'll be happy to take it. So the Deputy CEO of PAPSS.
Good morning and thank you, Papa. Maybe just one thing to add. She talked about controlling your destiny and your transactions. The commercial bank will be able to control their own settlement funds, put them at a Flexing bank, be able to manage them, and as you wish. We will not be having a control of any central bank to tell you, well, this transaction will not happen, so we can't settle it for you, or this amount, you've gone so much high, we're not doing it for you. So it gives you that much control for your own transactions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy CEO. Bosco Sebabi. He will have some time to also speak to the audience, but please raise your hand if you would like to speak. Okay, let me start here. I will come back there.
Thank you very much. My name is Godwin. I work at Zenith Bank Trade Services. I thought that one of the major challenges we want to get around as African country is to get away from the difficulties we have with using dollar as a means for settlement. Now, I've gone through this payment system, and I agree with Dr. Seto that, well, initial stages, we may have challenges. But I realize that we've gone round, and we have come back to using dollar as the base currency for settlement. And I ask myself, at the end of the day, what it is that we are trying to solve. Now, look at the charges we are proposing. If you say using the platform is $25, look at what SWIFT is offering. So I have gone through it, and I think that still, since I was in my mother's womb, I've been hearing single currency, African, and since we've never been able to get hold on getting, if we have a currency that we don't have to go through dollar, then we are getting solution to our problems. But with still going through dollar, I don't see how, with challenges of availability of dollar, that is going to limit the transactions that we are able to do. So we've gone around, and I don't see what problem really we're trying to solve. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think the question that you've asked is a fundamental question, and it's a question that we ask ourselves all the time at PAPSS. And the biggest challenge today in Africa is the convertibility of African currencies. So, for example, one of my colleagues came to Kenya. I'm from Kenya. So he came to Kenya for the first time. He only had Egyptian pounds. He wanted to be able to use, we have a mobile payment service called M-Pesa, which only uses Kenya shillings. So he wanted to be able to use this service and pay, but there's nowhere he could find where he could convert Egyptian pounds into Kenya shillings. And this is the fundamental problem, I think, that still needs to be resolved when it comes to payments in Africa. So we are cognizant of that, and this is the consideration we are making today, just knowing that to be able to facilitate payments and trade in Africa, we still want to make this ability possible for the day-to-day person conducting trade. And that's why we're continuing to allow these payments to take place in local currency. However, until the issue of currency convertibility is fully resolved, and this is something that we are also looking into, then we're using the dollar as transition in terms of settlement, and we've tried to find the most effective way to do it. So, as I mentioned, we only do settlement once a day. We do this as a net settlement, and then we are providing support in terms of a settlement guarantee. So we acknowledge that issue is still there, but it's an issue that is yet to be resolved, I think, at a more economic level. So in the interim, for us to be able to facilitate payments and trade, especially through the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, then we are putting forward a solution that would facilitate that with decreased usage of the USD.
Just before Monica did a very good job how she described the situation we are in Africa. I will take a little step back. The dollar has been used in the system as a trade currency for quite a while, over 200 years. And we will take cognizance of that. It's a fact. African currencies are not convertible. She just mentioned that. However, we also recognize that that's happening. And there's also one fact we need to know: there are imbalances in terms of trade between countries. In terms between Ghana trading with Liberia, there's a trade imbalance. Now, what is happening? What is going to happen is that if Ghana is exporting more to Liberia and Liberia is importing or exporting less, that means if we use local currencies purely, what will happen is that Ghana will have some Liberian currencies lingering in their books. Now, because there's no Ghanaian demanding for that currency to buy goods from Liberia, the demand for a currency is a derived demand. It's derived from the goods or services you want from that country. If you don't have any need for the goods, then it won't happen. So that means the Bank of Ghana said I will be struggling to have this currency to be able to sell. So at PAPSS, we said that difference, the net, is what we set on dollars, so that Ghana can have the dollars to be able to do many other things. What will happen is that as trade grows between countries, currencies align. Take a step. Look at Benin and Nigeria at the borders. Nobody gives them a rate. The naira automatically converts into the other currencies. So that's the dynamics of trade, and that's where trade links to payments. We are also in the process of setting up an exchange rate mechanism to be able to have currencies convertible into the others. This is a process which we have started. We've gotten experts to help us in that, and we'll discuss it with the Association of African Central Banks to be able to implement this. One thing we must know that we don't have a common central bank in Africa, and that's a very huge setback. Europe started the same way. Europe started with Target 1 that was an RTG system kind of connected to them without any common currency, without any institution. Now the payment system became efficient, that it showed the way that we need to move from a preferential trade area, where we are now, to a monetary union at another level. All these are stages of economic integration, preferential trade area, customs union, and so on, until we get a monetary union. Those are all stages, but we can go faster, especially by using payment systems and technology. So I thought that we should give you this kind of background so that we understand why we are now settling in the dollar and also maybe the euro, but eventually we have to phase it out. And we have to work with the central banks to be able to do this. Afro-Exim Bank and PAPSS cannot set up a central bank, but we can do a payment system and improve trade, and that will lead the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bosco.
Bosco, thank you. I think we need to differentiate between what PAPSS is proposing now and then what has been existing. Now, if you take a typical transaction among African countries, currently before PAPSS became operational, settlement is done on gross basis. For example, between Ghana and Nigeria, especially those banks that have subsidiaries, if they are not netting their subsidiary relationships, currencies are moving between Ghana and Nigeria on a gross basis without PAPSS. What I'm trying to drive at is that if we have a Ghanaian exporter who has exported goods, let's say to the worth of 100,000 Ghana cedis, and then a Ghanaian importer from Nigeria who has bought in from Nigeria, let's just say in Ghana city for simplicity, everything converted, has imported 200,000 Ghana cedis. What we'll be saying is that the Ghanaian exporter will receive his 100,000, and then the Ghanaian importer will pay out 200,000. Are we following what I'm trying to drive at? So what that means is that 200,000 of Ghanaian cedi, all things being equal, the currencies are traded at par, will move out from Ghana, and later on 100,000 will come in, okay, without PAPSS. Now, with PAPSS, the 200,000 will not move from Ghana. And the 100,000 we are receiving, what we need to really do as a country is just to transfer 100,000 to Nigeria. Are we following? So on a net basis, we have saved 100,000 from moving from Ghana. In the same way, Nigeria too, we have helped them not to make any effort to transfer any 100,000 to Ghana. So both two countries, in comparative analysis term, have benefited by the introduction of PAPSS. Now, you are right why the dollar is being used as the final net settlement currency. So what is going to happen is that we will have position of all the countries that are on PAPSS on net basis, not on gross basis. So it means that without PAPSS, we will have been moving a lot of dollars out of the Ghanaian economy to Nigeria. But with PAPSS, you have a net amount which will be smaller than the gross amount that we were exporting to Nigeria. Now, I made a point in my speech that one thing I have noted about payment system is that when you start, you are going to face a lot of problems. I hope Eli of MTN is here to come and share with you the problems he had when he was introducing mobile money into Ghana. The problems were more than what we are talking about, because this currency issue, currently, as I can say, is being handled at the AACB level. There are central bank issues which are beyond operators' issue. Now, this is a process that we have started. And the process I have stated, there are going to be intractable challenges. One step is to make a gains in comparative terms. In next 5 years, when we put the mechanism in place, what is going to happen is that we will move forward by harmonizing, having a common currency. One good thing is that the current generation of presidents that we are having in Ghana now, if you listen to the Kenya president, there's a viral video going around on the internet why he mentioned a country, which country did he mentioned one of this country, Djibouti and Kenya trading neighbors. Why should he go for a US? Now there's that consciousness there because we have been indoctrinated, thinking that the only good things come from outside. Everything is in Africa. It is left to us, all the knowledge, those of us who have the chance to school abroad or we school here, all the knowledge we have gained to solve our problem. Nobody is coming to solve the problem. It is we. Because it is in their advantage to help you rely on their currency. So this is a process, and I believe that maybe the next 20 years, our children, they will also take it to a point. So what is going to happen is that at the net effect, the common problem that we have not solved for so many years will be solved. And I believe that the next 20 years, we will not be in this room again and be discussing currency issue. Because that consciousness is coming. For example, if I'm going to Nigeria, why should I carry dollars? And one thing we should know also is that these countries we are calling Nigeria, Ghana, Benin, Togo, somebody came from somewhere, came and put pencil around African map, said that you be Ghana, you be Nigeria. You forgot that they are our brothers. China didn't get that chance to be divided into smaller pieces as a continent. Are you following? But somebody decided, those days when we were in our middle schools, they tell us that who discovered Zambia. Our people were staying in Zambia so many years. You were searching for minerals. You went to Zambia and said you discovered Zambia. And we also believe that they discovered Zambia. I think it will take us so many years before we come out with that consciousness. Nobody's discovered us. We were here. You say you wanted our gold. When you go to Buckingham Palace, all the gold they are taking there from Ashanti. You came here, you say you discovered Ashanti people. They were here. You were hungry and you came here. So please, we need consciousness. We need to do things beyond what traditionally we have been doing. There is no way, if we continue in this trajectory, we can make a progress. We need to check ourselves. There are going to be challenges. And I'm so happy about this past framework. Nobody, I said it already, nobody is saying that it is like serving a dinner or a lunch. No, there are going to be serious problems. And I know even some of the bands that are on the platform, they will decide to move out of the platform going forward. And some will still have faith in it, and they are the people who prevail. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Seto. So we will take a few questions because we are already late.
Okay, my name is Leonard Prince-Ashiagbo from Zenith Bank. I head projects and product development department. Mine is more to do with, not too much of a question, but just to say that it will be very important if, for example, if I have an account opened, the Zenith Bank account is opened on the platform. It is not all transactions that I would want to go through a particular account. So the system should be flexible enough that if I want to have sub-accounts beneath it to do different transactions, because, for example, if I'm running 3 different remittance companies, it will not be prudent to have all of them go through the same account. So the flexibility of the account will be very important, where we can have subs to be able to do what we have to do, if you get what I'm trying to say to you now.
Yes, so I think what I understand is that you have different types of transactions. You want to manage them differently, so
Exactly.
you want to have a sub-account under your main account.
Yes.
Okay, that is something we can facilitate.
Okay, because it goes a long way to help all the banks
Yeah.
do their reconciliations, one, and know the types of account, like transactions you're doing, and make settlement very easy. So that's my little contribution to the platform. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Timotina Bonsu from PAPSS Bank with the Trade and Working Capital team. So my question is in 2 folds. The first is with regards to the central bank as a regulator. With this commercial model, how much coverage do they have? And currently, they've given us a no objection for the model in which they are involved in. So now that we're proceeding to our free exim, do we need to write to the central bank again, or the initial no objection covers for all? And then secondly, with regards to the account with AFRI Exim, my question is, just a second. Right. Let's just answer the first one. I lost my train of thought. I'll come back to the second one. Thank you.
Okay. I think what I got from your first question, you were asking about the role of the central bank, especially with regards to the no objection. So for the banks that are already live with us, today we are just making one change. My colleague Noel, he's going to present after this about the onboarding process, but it's essentially just to make it as seamless as possible. So we're just going to add an addendum to the agreement that we have with you, but Noel will speak more to this. In terms of the central bank, we had consulted them with regard to this model, and they gave us the go-ahead to already engage the commercial banks. So if you have previously engaged the central bank, then we will then just share the addendum with you. But for the banks that have not yet come on board, they would still need to go to the central bank for the letters of no objection.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question, that has got to do with documentation. So currently for international payments in the USD currency, and when there's movement of, certain amount of USD from the country to another country, there are certain documentations that customers are required to provide. In this instance, with the AfriExim module, just want to understand how the PAPSS, supports with documents verification and then processing things, KYC, more or less. Thank you.
Okay. So today, PAPSS is just facilitating the payments leg. However, we are working with AfriExim Bank and some third parties on the aspects of trade documentation. So it's one of the products that we are looking into. But as of today, we are just handling the payment leg.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Musa, Head of Trade at Bank of Africa. In terms of the composition of the participants being engaged here, we're looking at commercial banks and then the customers. Commercial banks being the direct participants. I didn't hear anything about the indirect participant. Are you leaving the indirect participants to be engaged by the commercial banks? Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. So in terms of indirect participants, this model actually also considered that. And this is because one of the key things that has come from the engagements with the regulators is that they prefer for indirect participants to have their transactions going through a direct participant, so a commercial bank. So what is happening today is for anybody who wants to participate as an indirect participant, so us on the PAPSS side, we sponsor them in terms of putting in place a sponsorship agreement, an arrangement that can be used between the direct participant and the indirect participant. But we also then show them the banks that are live on our system, and then they can, because most of them are already working with commercial banks, then they can then select the bank through which they want to participate in PAPSS. So that's the approach we're taking for indirect participants.
Good morning. My name is Jacob Annan from Agricultural Development Bank. Definitely the next bank to be added to the list up there because we are far advanced. Thank you very much. Monica. Yes, you said in your presentation, the second advantage you gave for the commercial bank model is setting of your rate. That's the benefit of setting your own rate. I'm wondering which rate, because if Ghanaians are dealing with Kenyan or Nigerian, we have a cross between Naira and Cedi. Now, the basis of settlement is dollar. So which one, where is the benefit lying about? This goes to buttress the first question the man asked about what are we trying to achieve. It's the same thing. I hope I've made myself clear. The benefit, you said you are one of the, let me get it right. You said set the exchange rate is a benefit. Which exchange rate are we talking about now with the cross and now direct USD? Thank you very much.
Okay. So on a daily basis, your central bank will provide a rate to you, an indicative rate. And on the basis of that, then if you have a customer wanting to do a payment, let me use your example, to Kenya, then you'd use that rate. So it's going to be a rate, say, of the Ghanaian cedi to the dollars. So for a transaction going to Kenya, then the party on the other side, say it's a commercial bank, that also provide a rate to of the Kenya shilling to the dollar. And on the basis of that, then we at PAPSS can calculate the cross rate for the transaction. So you're asking what the benefit is. So one of the key pieces of feedback we've received from commercial banks is that the rate that the central bank provides is, well, it's provided on a daily rate, but the rate first keeps moving throughout the course of the day in the market. That's one. And then there are banks that have certain arrangements with their customers to set specific rates. There are banks that also have walk-in customers who may ask for a certain rate, and they want to be able to deal with that. So the benefit is by setting your rate. First, on our system, we allow you to modify it during the course of the day to manage any fluctuations that may happen. And you can also then factor in any volatility that happens during the course of the day in providing that to your customers. So that was one of the considerations we made in allowing the commercial bank to be the one to set the FX rate.
My name is T.A. Bafi from B Systems. We want to find out when can the fintech companies join this PAPSS?
Okay, good question. So as I was mentioning to the gentleman who asked the question on the indirect participants, so at PAPSS we consider fintechs to be indirect participants. And as I mentioned, we work closely with the regulators, and the guidance we have is for the fintechs to participate through a commercial bank. So the answer is you can participate as soon as possible. The banks you can use are the banks that are already listed here as live banks. So if you've already seen your bank here, you can already approach them and let them know that as a fintech, you want them to sponsor you to participate in PAPSS. Sorry? Oh, there's some banks.
Sorry, for the fintech here, please, if you have identified any bank just to be your settlement bank, just write to Bank of Ghana that you want to this is my settlement bank. I want to be on the platform. And then you'll be giving a go ahead to what? Oh, so those, Mr. Befi, if you are ready, just find your settlement bank, because automatically the receipts and those things have to be in the bank account. So you just tell us that too. You have bank A is my settlement bank, so I want to be on the platform. It doesn't involve any documentation. We expect the bank that you are selecting to do the due diligence on you. Because you are already maybe dealing with some of them. We will just tell you to go ahead.
On the question of documentation as far as payment on the platform is concerned, as the lady asked, Dr. Sector, in our engagement with the regulator, it was clearly made that the same documentary requirements and processes that we take our transactions through on the street file, the same requirements is what we are supposed to request from our customers. So as far as documentations are concerned, Dr. Seto is here, nothing has changed. So if the customer comes, as an applicant comes to initiate a transfer process, the same documents that you request from the customer on there is the same documentation processes that you need to. I thought that we just need to make that clear in answer to the question she asked. Thank you.
All right.
Last
Thank you very
question.
much.
Thank you. My name is Jinjin Fuachi from Prudential Bank, the commercial department. My question has to do is for the customer.
Okay.
They made a complaint that they are unable to initiate a transaction from Nigeria because we gave them all the banks you have listed over there. So if it is true, have anybody here received from Nigeria? And then which bank did they use so we can also recommend? Thank you.
So at the moment in Nigeria, I think there has been some new requirements on PAPSS that are being introduced by the central bank. So the central bank requested to be able to communicate to their market before allowing transactions to come from the commercial banks there. So I think there have been engagements at the very highest levels, including at the governor level. So they will issue a circular to all the commercial banks, indicating to them exactly what they expect when it comes to PAPSS, and I believe that would then facilitate those transactions.
Thank you so much, Monica. I think we're done with this presentation. We will now move to the next one, the requirements to get onboarded into SSA 3. That presentation will be done by my colleagues Noel Aja. But before that, please, a round of applause for Monica Arao. So, unfortunately, my colleague Noel couldn't make it here with us. As you know, PAPSS is a Pan-African payment system, so we need to deal with the whole continent. So we try to use the team for each action that we are doing on ground. So now, Noel is going to present. We are waiting for the technician to put him online.
Good morning all, dear executives, dear PAPSS participants, and future PAPSS participants, PAPSS project managers and everyday collaborators, all protocol duly observed. So seeing you gathered in this room shows again your commitment to work side by side with us on this journey toward a prosperous Africa. Thank you very much. So this being said, I will now provide you with an insight on the procedure for participating in the commercial bank settlement model. I will need to turn off my camera so that we can ensure a good quality of connection. And I will share my screen now. Okay, so we'll just kick off with the documentation aspect of it. My colleague Monica has highlighted
Noel,
the value
please.
addition
Can you
that
hear me,
PAPSS
please?
is bringing to the table. So this value addition goes along with the security, reliability, stability, and effectiveness of the PAPSS system. To achieve this, PAPSS has defined under its bylaw the framework for the operation and governance of the overall PAPSS, which gives effect to the PAPSS scheme rules and technical standards that are essential to facilitate a reliable, stable, and effective international payment system. PAPSS also has a credit rule book that defines the principles and guidelines that govern cross-border instant payment services and operation in PAPSS. We also have a membership agreement, multiple membership agreement depending on the type of participation, that provide details on the scope of responsibilities of each participant and ensure the commitment to complete activities falling under the responsibility as per the agreed standard for the benefit of all PAPSS participants. In terms of participation requirements, so the first element which is critical is a national prerequisite, so which is a letter of no objection from the central bank. All participants will need to reach out to the central bank to obtain a letter of no objection. All our participants need to sign a membership agreement, and we also request our participants to provide a board resolution authorizing their participation in PAPSS. Each participant is also required to provide 2 legal opinions. So one country opinion. So the country opinion will speak to the ability to connect to PAPSS, taking it into consideration the local regulation. And the capacity opinion will speak to the legal capacity to be a participant in PAPSS. We also request our participants to provide a self-attestation statement, and that speaks to the technology compliance requirement. And finally, we require that all our participants complete KYC processes, which is actually undertaken by our participant, by our collaborator, Mansa. And the last element is the participation agreement. So we have the direct participant membership agreement, which is for all participants that would like to initiate payment onto PAPSS, receive payment onto PAPSS. And then we have the newly introduced direct participant settlement membership agreement for all our participants that would like to participate in settlement, that would like to provide FX to settle their transactions initiated onto PAPSS. And for all our existing participants that have already signed the direct participant membership agreement, we will now need to share with them an addendum to the direct participant membership agreement so that this can cover their participation in the settlement, commercial bank settlement model. Let's now talk about onboarding. So for a participant to be onboarded onto PAPSS, the first element that we do is the creation on IPS. It's for us to grant access to the participant of the instant payment, to the instant payment system. So once we give that access, we also create the users on the instant payment system. So those are the users that will not be able to complete cross-border transactions activities on the instant payment system. So we have the admin users. The admin users are responsible for the creation of the other users. They also manage digital certificates. They are responsible for user access real time, and they're responsible as well for viewing and pooling activity reports. And then we have what we call the funding users or treasury operation users that are responsible for funding the bank's account via RTGS, and they're responsible for funding as well indirect participants and also monitoring of the bank's liquidity on PAPSS. We have the payment operation users that are responsible for initiating and authorizing payment. They're responsible for confirming transaction status and investigating as well if there's a failed payment. And they're also responsible for viewing and downloading participant transaction reports. We have reconciliation and settlement operation users that are responsible for reconciling the bank's books and resolving discrepancies. They are also responsible for spooling reconciliation reports, and they can also spool settlement report when it comes to the commercial bank model. We have compliance operation users that are responsible for monitoring all operation processes and procedures to ensure that the participant adheres to the regulations and ethical standards, and they are also responsible for monitoring transactions. And finally, we have the SC3, or again, the commercial bank FX rate management user that are responsible for the creation of FX rate on the instant payment system. They are responsible for monitoring FX rates and also modifying and updating FX rate on the system. So for us to be able to achieve this, to create a participant on the instant payment system, we require or we request our participant to provide us with two forms. The first one is a direct participant application form, and the second one is a user access request form that we use to give those access that I've just mentioned. Let's now talk about the settlement account to be opened in the books of Afrexim Bank for the purpose of that participation in settlement. So we require all our participants to provide us with a settlement account opening pack, which is comprised of an account opening form, Afrexim Bank AML questionnaire, and some other elements. So for all our participants that already have an account with Afrexim Bank, we only request them to send a letter to Afrexim Bank requesting that a settlement account is opened for the benefit in the books of Afrexim Bank. So the third element when it comes to enablement is training. So all our participants are trained on the system, so we ensure that the training sessions are effective. We have some theory, we have practical elements as well as part of those training, and we ensure that the training sessions are really interactive. And once the training is completed, we share a user manual, training videos as well, and we ensure that all the users attending the training have the knowledge tested to make sure that they are enough comfortable when it comes to undertaking activities on the instant payment system. Let's now talk about the main differences as of today between new participants that will now be onboarded on the commercial bank model and the existing participants that will be onboarded on the commercial bank model. So for the new
recording stopped.
The first element to provide is the direct participant settlement membership agreement. This is just a recap of what I just said earlier. We spoke about the letter of no objection, we spoke about the board resolution, the country and the capacity opinion, the self-attestation statement and the KYC aspect. We also mentioned the direct participant application form and whatever we need to receive to ensure that we can open a settlement account in the books of Afrexim Bank. We spoke about the enablement on the instant payment system, and we spoke about training. When it comes to the existing participants, we don't need to receive a new direct participant application form. The only thing that we will do is to share with you an addendum to the direct participant application form so that we can have the element related to the commercial bank model captured. And for all our existing participants that already have an account with Afrexim Bank, as I said earlier, the only thing that we require you to provide is it's a letter actually. So if you receive a letter from you requesting for the settlement account to be open, we will do so because you already have that relationship with Afrexim Bank. We will also ensure that the users, the FX users, these are the users that are supposed to create the rate on the system or to set the rate on the system. Those users are created by the admin users, and we will train all those new FX users. So I think I would just stop here and take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
All right. I mean, if there's no question, that means it's very clear. Thank you so much, Noel. Because we started a bit late, let's seize this opportunity now to invite you, dear guests, to just step outside, and we invite you for a short coffee break. I'd like to get back in the room at 11:35, right? So we can now start the second part of the session. That second part of the session is really dedicated to the end user, the traders, the brokers, all our partners that are here, the SMEs as well. We'll have, again, some videos that we will play, but my colleagues, Gloria Tanga, she also works in the business development team, will also do a presentation on PAPSS, let's say a more friendly presentation of PAPSS and the benefit for the end users. So I will invite you, please, dear guests, to go to the coffee break. Thank you. So, as I said before, this second session of this roadshow is dedicated to the end users. We, in the registration, we have a list of traders, SMEs, even large companies who registered and they are in the room. And this session is for you. We also want to hear from you. If you have any concern, any specific question to us on PAPSS, we are here to respond to those questions. So just before we start this session, we will play a video. We call it the how-to video. It's detail how PAPSS, how our system works. But again, I'd like to say that this is for the layman, those people who are not familiar with the business, to have a better understanding. And after that video, I will now invite my colleague, Gloria Tonga. She will attend virtually. She will present PAPSS, Discover PAPSS, and the benefits of for the end customer. So please, can you play the video? Thank you.
African continent. It takes multiple days to receive the payments. One or two correspondent banks are involved in the process, making it longer and expensive. And settlement is made in foreign currencies. With PAPSS, cross-border payments become a smooth journey. First, an originator issues a payment instruction to their bank or payment service provider. The payment instruction is then sent to PAPSS. PAPSS carries out all the necessary validation checks. Then the payment instruction is forwarded to the beneficiary's bank or payment service provider. And finally, the beneficiary's bank clears the funds to the beneficiary in their local currency by enabling super-fast real-time transactions that begin and end in the local currency with convenient pre-funding in the currency of the country of origin and settlement guaranteed by Afrexim Bank with net settlement across all participating banks at the same time, 11 o'clock UTC every day. To be part of this great transformation to make faster and more affordable payments across Africa, make online purchases country to country, and send remittances across the continent. Join the fast-growing network of PAPSS participants. Visit papss.com today.
Hi, Papa.
Yes. Good afternoon, Gloria. So, Gloria Tonga is working at member of the business development team, and she's going to present PAPSS, the Pan-African Payment Settlement System. Over to you, Gloria.
Okay, thank you, Papa. A very good morning to you all. My name is Gloria Atanga from Business Development, and it's a great pleasure for me to be able to attend, at least virtually, the PAPSS Roadshow in Ghana. I will be taking you through a high-level presentation of PAPSS, and this intends to equip you with a better understanding of what PAPSS is, what is the value added of PAPSS, and how you can use PAPSS for your cross-border payments. So I will be sharing my screen. Papa, I would kindly ask you to confirm when you can see my screen. All right, so we like to set the background with the African Continental Free Trade Area, and this is the largest single continental market for goods and services across the world that aims to provide the free movement of business persons and investments in order to accelerate the success of this Continental Free Trade Agreement. The AFCFTA also ambitions to bring together all the 55 member states of the African Union, thereby creating a market of more than 1.2 billion people with a combined GDP of more than $2.5 trillion. So the African Continental Free Trade Area is the flagship project of the 10-year implementation agenda of the African Union, which is the Africa we want. So in terms of the relationship with PAPSS, as of today, the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat has set up 4 implementation pillars to ensure the success of this unified market. First, we have the trade facility that aims to support small and medium-sized enterprises, especially those managed by women and young people. Then we have the African Trade Gateway, which is a one-stop digital platform with information on rules that apply to thousands of products that will be traded under this unified market. We have the AFCFTA Adjustment Facility, which is expected to cushion the fiscal effects of tariff loss. And finally, we have the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, that's PAPSS, and it was endorsed by the heads of states at the African Union on the 7th of July 2019 as the payment and settlement framework for the success of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So what then is PAPSS? Well, PAPSS is a financial market infrastructure that aims to transform how cross-border payments are made in Africa. To do this, we offer instant payments that are made in local currencies. And essentially, this aims to domesticate intra-Africa payments because as of today, you have about 80% of transactions generated in Africa that are settled outside of Africa. So with PAPSS, we aim to reverse these dynamics. Also, our system supports USD payments in the country where this would be preferred. In addition, we have our compliance, legal, and sanction checks that are performed instantly within the 120 seconds of processing time for every payment. We have settlement that is done on a multilateral net basis and on the agreed settlement currency. We have a system that operates 24 hours, 7 days a week, and this means that our customers are able to perform instant payments all day round. Finally, by removing the dependencies on third currencies as well as correspondent banking, PAPSS reduces the cost of bank transfers in Africa. So this slide helps us to understand how PAPSS operates. We have a number of key participants in our ecosystem, the first being the central bank. So initially, the deployment model we used was that of the central bank, whereby in order to enter any country, we had to onboard the central bank first. So once we have the central bank signing up on PAPSS, there is an onboarding that is done with the technical integration. And once that's complete, then we can move to the second phase, that is the onboarding of switches. Some countries, such as Ghana, have national switches, and the central banks have made it a requirement for all PAPSS transactions to go through these national switches. So there's an onboarding and a technical integration of the national switch that needs to be done at the same time. Then we now have the commercial bank through which the end customer would be able to use PAPSS. So once a commercial bank signs on PAPSS, there is also an onboarding process. So when the commercial bank signs, there is an onboarding process in which we have to finalize integration before PAPSS can be made available to the end customer. Finally, we also have the fintechs that are able to participate on our ecosystem. The system was designed to enable the participation of mobile money operators, money transfer operators, card schemes, as well as any other payment service providers. So we are currently building a framework to develop, to enable the onboarding of PAPSS to enable the onboarding of fintechs on PAPSS. But as of today, the fintechs can already use PAPSS through the commercial banks. And as you may have heard from the Director of Payments, you need to find a commercial bank that will play the role of settlement agent. And once that's complete, then you can reach out to the central bank to be able to perform these payments on PAPSS. So in a nutshell, this is how the ecosystem of PAPSS is structured and how we onboard our different participants before PAPSS is made available for the end user. So here we have a very key slide that speaks to what can you use PAPSS for, as well as how can you use PAPSS. So although we have a mandate to facilitate payments under the African Continental Free Trade area, we would like to highlight the fact that PAPSS is at its very core a payment system. And so this means that we have the ability to facilitate all types of payment, of cross-border payments. And this includes value payments, high value payments, trade payments, retail payments, remittances, and any other types of applicable payments. So we are not just limited to trade payments. In terms of how you can use PAPSS, our system currently supports a number of access channels, and these are mobile banking, online banking, as well as the branches to which the customers can go to directly in order to use PAPSS. So these access channels depend on what the commercial bank would offer to the end customer. We also frequently get a question around the transaction limits on PAPSS, and we would like to highlight here that the system itself has no transaction limits. However, regulatory requirements may apply where relevant. So in the case of Ghana, for instance, as of today, with the central bank providing the funds for the settlement of cross-border transactions, we have the central bank that implemented a limit of $2,000 for individuals, as well as $5,000 for corporate transactions. Again, this is a limit that would be addressed with our new commercial bank settlement model, in which the commercial banks would provide the funds directly, and the customers would be able to perform cross-border transactions with much more flexibility. So here we have a use case of what a transaction on PAPSS would look like. We have a scenario of a reseller of rubber located in Ghana who would like to purchase rubber from a trader located in Nigeria. Now, the commercial bank in Ghana and the commercial bank in Nigeria are the banks of the reseller and the trader respectively. And again, for this transaction to go through PAPSS, we would need both commercial banks to be onboarded on the system, because only participants of our ecosystem can use the platform to transact. So once we have this confirmation, you would have the reseller initiate the transaction through any access channel provided by their bank. So this could be online banking, mobile banking, or through the branches. And once the bank receives this payment instruction, the bank would send the message with all payment details to PAPSS. PAPSS would then validate this payment message and send it to the beneficiary's commercial bank in Nigeria. The beneficiary's commercial bank would verify the details of the beneficiary, send the positive response to PAPSS, and PAPSS would change the status of the transaction to final before the funds are being transferred into the trader's account. And here you would have the reseller receive a notification on the outcome of the transaction. So, as previously mentioned, these transactions are performed within 120 seconds maximum, but we would like to highlight the fact that PAPSS is able to perform cross-border transactions in 20 seconds on average as at today. Another thing we want to highlight from this slide is the fact that when the commercial bank sends the payment instruction to PAPSS, the reason why PAPSS validates this payment message is because PAPSS is a pre-funded payment system, which means that commercial banks will need to pre-fund their accounts at the level of PAPSS in order to facilitate transactions for their customers. If the commercial bank does not have sufficient funds in their accounts, then the payment would be rejected. But if there are sufficient funds, then PAPSS will validate the payment and send it to the beneficiary's commercial bank. So this scenario applies to the commercial banks, but like we said, we have a number of participants on our ecosystem. When we have the fintechs that would be onboarded on PAPSS, the same scenario will apply. We would simply replace the fintech, the commercial bank here, with the fintech, and it's the same case with stock market transactions. So here we've highlighted a few benefits of PAPSS for you. The first is obviously the fact that you are able to perform cross-border transactions within 120 seconds maximum. And we saw that our average as of today is 20 seconds for this cross-border payments. We have the fact that PAPSS immediately runs essential checks and validations. So we ensure that the identity of the beneficiary is the correct one in order to ensure the payment of the transaction. And here we see that with PAPSS, there are only two parties involved in the transaction. This is the sending and receiving institution. So with this architecture, we considerably reduce the cost of the transaction for the end customer. We reduce the time of the transaction, and there is clear visibility on when your payment would be received. This means that if after 120 seconds, the beneficiary has not received value, then the transaction did not go through. And finally, PAPSS enables cross-border payments both in local currency as well as in dollars. So here we have a caption of our growing network. As previously mentioned, we started with a deployment model in which we onboarded central banks before being operational in the country. So as of today, we have 9 central banks on our network. These are the Central Bank of Nigeria, Bank of Ghana, Central Bank of Liberia, Central Bank of Guinea, of the Gambia, Sierra Leone, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Bank of Zambia, and the Central Bank of Djibouti. We currently have 68 commercial banks on our network, and we collaborate both with national switches as well as private switches. In terms of our strategic partnerships, we have memorandums of understanding with a number of partners that help us to implement and deliver our mission across Africa. For instance, we have the West African Monetary Institute that help us to operationalize the project in the West African Monetary Zone. So how can you use PAPSS in Ghana? Well, as you can see, PAPSS is fully live in Ghana. We currently have 18 banks in Ghana that have signed on the system. But again, there's a difference between the banks that have signed up and the banks that are ready to transact on PAPSS. So in terms of the banks that are ready for use as of today, for any of your cross-border transactions, we have 11 of them. So these are GCB, UBA, GT Bank, Prudential Bank, Consolidated Bank Ghana, Universal Merchant Bank, Bank of Africa, Stanbic Bank, Omnibisic, First Bank, and Zenith Bank. So these banks, as of today, are fully ready for use for your PAPSS cross-border transactions. And on top of that, we have a number of banks that will be finalizing their integration of PAPSS within a month or so. And these are the Agricultural Development Bank, First National Bank, Access Bank, Fidelity Bank, ABSA, First Atlantic Bank, and Core Bank. So these are the banks you can go to, the banks that are ready for use. You can go to PAPSS transactions. And in the upcoming months, we would be announcing more banks available on PAPSS Transact. So we have now come to the end of the presentation. We would be happy to take any questions you may have at this point.
Thank you, Gloria. Please, a round of applause for my colleague, Gloria. So before we progress, I'd like to hear from the guests, the traders, the SMEs. We presented PAPSS. We highlight the key benefits for you.
We also told you these are the banks where you can go to do those transactions. So I would like to know if any of you have any question, any issue that would like to share with us. We're happy to take it. Please just raise your hand.
Good afternoon once again. Mine is just a contribution. What I just want to indicate is that there must be the need to harmonize regulations across the various countries that are participating in this. If that is not done, and you have one jurisdiction having requirements which are entirely different from the other countries, it creates different experiences for a same customer who would find his or herself in different locations. So that is very critical for us to look at. If you look at the transaction limitations, for instance, Bank of Ghana, for individual it is 2,000 and for corporate it is 5,000. I mean, this is woefully inadequate. I'm sure if my wife, is going on a business trip, giving her 5,000, I'm sure she'll say she'll not travel. Let alone for it to be a corporate transaction. So we actually need to look at that aspect. And once those things are done, I'm sure we'll be making progress. It's the end user who will make this thing survive. If the end users do not see real value in this, they would always stick to the traditional system that we are using. Thank you very much.
That was a very good comment, actually. Maybe I don't even have to answer it, but I think I just wanted to elucidate a little bit on what we are doing in terms of regulation. SFTA people have left, but this was a question to them and also us. We are working on harmonizing regulation for trade services, especially financial services across Africa with the Secretariat and the Association of African Central Banks, so that we harmonize all that. In terms of the limits, in any system, normally once it's beginning, you put those limits just to test and see if if you're going to lose 5,000, don't lose $1 million. But we've established that actually there are no losses, there are no hindrances, security is good. So that's why we are now coming with a commercial bank settlement model that actually will open it up. I've just been talking to some people and telling them this will be opened up because the commercial banks will manage their own clients, know how much money they transact, and settle that. So that should not be a worry for anybody.
My name is Matilde Misa. I do flower pots, and mainly for export. And I'm with the National Association of Handicraft Exporters. And every year in November, we go to a Berlin show. We are about 30. And whenever we go, how to bring our proceeds back home is always a problem. And some of us do sell maybe 5,000 euros, 10,000 euros, 12,000 euros, at least 5,000 euros, and we are about 30. So I would like to know if maybe this year, November, if we can add all our money and we can use it to pass through PAPSS. We would like to do that with you, to bring the money home for us. Do you understand what I mean?
Thank you. So, Gloria, did you hear the question, or are you still there?
Yes, Papa, I'm still here, but unfortunately, I'm not hearing the questions very well. I don't know if there's an issue with the microphone.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me very well, Gloria?
What I mean is, we usually go to Mercy Berlin, a trade fair in Berlin, every year in November. And this year we are going, and we are about 30 exhibitors. And mostly some sells 30,000 euro, 20,000, 10,000, at least 5,000 euros. And to bring it back home at times is usually a problem for us. So some use them to buy things to come home and sell. So this time, we don't want to buy anything to come and sell. We want to bring our money back home. So if you can help us to bring the money back home, to come and take it in euros for us, I think we'll appreciate it.
Thank you. Is that clear now, lawyer?
If it's not clear, I'll take it.
Go ahead.
That's very important, and I'm glad that some people are trading out of Africa. One of the pillars of PAPSS is to be the interconnectivity between Africa and the world. For now, we are harmonizing in Africa to make sure that in the beginning, Dr. Seta is gone, but you talked about how trade in Africa is very low. So we want to concentrate on Africa first, and then we can be able to support international overseas trade as well. So I wouldn't guarantee that in November we'll have arrived at that point. If you are trading within Africa, yes, by November, actually not even November, just tomorrow, we are already live with you, would support you. But Berlin, I understand, is in German. Is it? It's in German. So German, Europe, and Africa, yes, our objective and pillar is to interconnect Africa and the rest of the world. However, we cannot have done that in November this year.
Contribution to assist their problem. If they are going there as exhibitors, that means they are exporters. And I would want to believe that they came under a registered entity, okay? If they do not come under a registered entity, that will be recognized by the system over there and given the mandate to be able to repatriate funds. It will be a very difficult thing. So to make it possible for you to repatriate your money, you should come under a registered umbrella. Now you sell, you collect the money, which is legitimate, and once you put that together, and then you have records of all of you, who is supposed to collect what. Once it comes back locally, then you should be able to have your money. But if you had sold the goods and put the money in your individual purse, when you are exiting at the airport, their exchange regulations will restrict you and you will not be able to repatriate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the contribution. We'll take this question. Please, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My name is Bright from Cal Bank. From the board, I can see that a lot of the commercial banks that are hooked up on PAPSS are in West Africa. So I would like to find out what PAPSS as an entity is doing to get a lot of the banks in Northern Africa connect to PAPSS and then East as well, because I believe a lot of trade goes on in the North and the East as well. So I would like to find out what PAPSS is doing to get the banks in the North and in the East connected to PAPSS to facilitate the trade.
Thank you very much. Maybe let me just look at what our design principles were when we were beginning the payment system in Africa. One of the things that we looked at was how is Africa structured? Africa is structured in terms of 42 countries, 55 countries, 42 currencies, 41 currencies thereabout, with majorly 4 languages. We have people speak English, French, Lusophone, which is Portuguese, Spanish, and also Arabic. So we said, let's look at a region that has all those characteristics and pilot in that. And when you look at it, in all the regions in Africa that have 2 languages, French and English, that are majorly spoken, and different currencies and different languages. That is the West African Monetary Zone. You have countries speaking English and one country speaking French, and 6 currencies and central banks. So the essence was that let's pilot it here, let's succeed on this, and then we can spread it to the rest of Africa. So that was done successfully. We launched this one last year, and we have spread now to the east. We have one central bank that has joined us in the east, Djibouti, and 2 central banks in the southern part of Africa who have joined. So we are now integrating those commercial banks as well to come and join the 6 to 8 commercial banks within the WAMS region. At the same time, we're approaching regions. We're talking to SADC, the East African Community, and now also at the level of Africa, we're discussing with the Association of African Central Banks, which has actually supported PAPSS, and the last meeting we had with them, they said this is fine. In the Assembly of Governors, we will conclude and say, let's all join the system to be able to spread everywhere in Africa. So we are on that journey as well, but we had to start somewhere and prove the concept. Timelines, it depends on 2 things. One, the accessing to agreements can be quick, but in terms of integration, you need to look at what infrastructures are central banks running or commercial banks running. So the integration depends on those infrastructures. So I cannot give you a timeline until I know what kind of infrastructures they are running and at what level of advancement they are in electronic payment systems.
On the question of the limits for settlement, I thought you were going to respond to it, because my understanding is that it is when you are going through the settlement for the central banks that this limit is applicable. And if you want to go around these limits, then you settle through aphorism. You need to clarify that so that we know that the settlement through aphorism doesn't have regulatory threshold like the 2,000 and the 5,000 he said. If I want to get around it with a bigger ticket transaction, then I settle through aphorism. And that one, in your presentation, you said no limit on that. You need to clarify that so that we know.
Yeah, I think let me repeat it. I'm taking a risk at answering Seta's question. That's a central banker. But I was a central bank before, so I'll take that risk to answer on behalf of the Bank of Ghana. I used to be a central bank in the National Bank of Rwanda. I held Seta's position. So we used to know each other. So I can answer for him. Now, we started off by using the Central Bank of Ghana's settlement funds for settlement, which they put at Afrexim Bank. Now, and they said, okay, let's see these transactions through. Let's limit them so that we can have many of them to test the system. That was done. Now, we had a discussion and said, now, we don't need any more to interfere in this. This is banks' business. The banks can open their own settlement accounts and do their transactions to any limit. That's what we mentioned, and that's where we are today, launching this commercial bank settlement model so that the commercial banks can use it, put their own settlement funds, and their clients can swim and fill and do their businesses, like the gentleman said. Where the wife is doing businesses, you can give her any amount of money as long as the banks there can support you. So that is the response to that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm wondering where my colleagues are. They left me on the battlefield.
Before
there's a
Yes, actually, I was about to say that the commercial banks are monopolizing the floor. So I would like to hear again from the traders, the SMEs, please. But, so of course, we'll give you the floor as well.
Okay, so once I'm holding the microphone, maybe this might be my last contribution. I'm sure you may not have the answer here. However, I am just trying to suggest that high brains could be put together such that Afrexim would begin to start thinking about a commercial paper that would have a value that would be acceptable to all the African countries. So in that, you would begin to start regulating that particular commercial paper that becomes a medium of exchange for all the African countries that can run, concurrently with their, sovereign currencies. So that with time, if people begin to have faith in that particular currency as an alternative, it may probably compel the various African head of states to come down and see that the echo that we have dreamt about, let us make it a reality. Thank you.
I think it's a very brilliant suggestion, actually. I think we'll take that on board and be able to deliver the message to Afreximbank that this can be thought about and be done. So that's a very brilliant idea, how to arrive at a monetary unit of our own. Thank you.
Anyway, to my point, I hope, first and foremost, I hope you're not planning to come up with a mobile app.
About what? Sorry?
A mobile app.
Okay.
I hope it's not part of what you plan to implement. And my reason is this. If you're giving us the opportunity to use the platform and to make it better, you're not supposed to be competing with the banks. So you rather share the APIs and everything with us, we do the integration and let the customers enjoy it from our end. But if you start playing in the role of where the commercial bank is playing, then automatically it's going to forfeit the whole intention of what we want to achieve. That's number one. Second, no, we want to all hear you. Let it be on record. I didn't hear you.
Okay. We are not here to compete with commercial banks. We are here to support them to do their business. So what we provide is a rail for you to come and put all your application and enjoy to send and receive payments. Okay. That is our role.
Very well noted. I think this will be on record then. For tomorrow's sake. Yes. And then the other thing, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you any difficult questions like I asked you yesterday. Don't worry. The other thing would be, here we are looking like her questions you asked. Yes, indeed, because of the jurisdiction, it's not possible, but I think there's still a way around it. What am I saying? If that institution is registered or has an account with any of the financial institutions, well, let me talk about my bank at this moment. Okay, I think there will definitely be a way to get that money remitted back into the country, still using the same platform. Okay, but I will not explain the rest of the secret stays here, but I'm saying that there is a way to do it. That is why I asked you the question I asked earlier on about where I'm able to have a sub-account under my main, and that would resolve her problem for her. So if you make that available, like you said you will, it would go a long way to help the banks as well. Thank you.
So now, Madam, you have a solution that when the bank is proposing a solution, they can offer to you and work through us. So your question's answered. So ask him if by November he can deliver that, because he's already a participant in PAPSS.
All right.
Thank you. But where are the rest of the people?
Any hands up? No more question. So I think now we are at the end of the roadshow. Bosco, please, you have to do your closing remarks. So I'd invite the Deputy CEO of PAPSS to do the closing remarks. Please come on stage. Please, just a round of applause for Mr. Bosco.
Thank you very much, Papa. My intention was not to speak much, but my team seems to have, there are so many things they are working on, some answering calls at work. But I won't say much. Let me first of all write on the protocols that have been mentioned by Mike and the rest of the speakers, SETA and the rest. But there are just a few facts I want to put on the board. One, intra-African trade is very low. We are at between 14 and 16, and depending, when they exclude the North Africa, we are at 14. When they include it, we are at 16. Clearly, that's the lowest in the world. Intra-American trade is in the 70%, Europe is close to 80s. So basically, the onus is on us to be able to increase that. The other fact is that 70% of our population are young people, either youth. I think youth range between age of 0, 1 day, to 35 or 33, they are about. More interestingly, 35% of those youth are below 15 years of age. So what is left for us is to support that population and make sure that population supports the growth of Africa. Now, the other fact that we talked about, somebody mentioned it, is the loss of 5 billion in terms of charges in our, that has been estimated by the Afrexim Bank. Now, this is just in fees. We have not talked about the opportunity cost of having that money moving around the world. Any money is worth today more than tomorrow. So if I have my money instantly, I'm better off, and PAPSS offers that. Now let me tell you a small story. I was here last year in May, and I come from Rwanda, and I did my university in Rwanda. So in our area where we lived, there was this young man, I think he was a few years younger than me. He was still in high school, and we used to meet. So I bumped into him on the beach here. So we talked and hugged and greeted. Then I told him, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing in Ghana? He told me, no, he's here for some trade. But he told me, then I also told him what I was doing. When I told him I was doing Pan-African Payment Settlement System, he told me now his dilemma. He told me he's trading between France, DRC, Rwanda, and Canada. He told me that the payments between Canada and France, he receives it in less than a day, a couple of hours. And he told me that the payments from Canada to Rwanda, or France to Rwanda, and France to DRC take maybe 2 to 3 days. But the payment between DRC and Rwanda were taking more than 10 days. So he told me, Bosco, you're here to solve my problem. Now, and you can see clearly he was telling me that he's going to start doing more business between the other countries. So that is trade lost between DRC and Rwanda. So there's so much trade that we are losing between ourselves, between these two countries, between our own countries, between Benin and Nigeria, between Ghana and Nigeria. Just look at across the borders, how much we have. So that's a story to tell you how inefficient payment systems are in Africa. Now, a payment is the most important economic activity. If we look at it, you're either paying or you're getting paid. And without that activity, that means there's no economics. There's no economies are not running. And the payment system is the infrastructure, is the plumbing of economic activity. So clearly we must all work towards having a clear, efficient payment systems in Africa to implement trade across the borders. Now, come to Ghana. Ghana has always been the cradle for Pan-Africanism. You saw how passionate Dr. Seta is, how passionate you all are. We moved venue, but you still came. This is Ghana. This is the Ghanaian people. This is what we've always known as Africans, that Ghana is the cradle of Pan-Africanism. The first central bank to fund the settlement account was the Bank of Ghana. The first bank to do a transaction was in Ghana. PAPSS was launched in Ghana. So we see that Ghana is a cradle of Pan-Africanism. Now, just my last message is that this is a kind of a revolution. It's a revolution in the sense that we are starting something that is sustainable and for the longer term. They say a revolution cannot be done by one woman or one man, but can be initiated. So let's assume all of us here in the room, we are one people initiating this revolution as the Ghanaian banking sector, the first banking sector to do transactions within PAPSS. So the onus is on us and yourselves to be able to deliver this system. It's delivered already, but to be able to promote it and sell it. So let Ghana be the springboard of PAPSS massive transactions. This is a message I would leave to you. Let Ghana be the springboard of massive transactions, so this can go in the books of history, that system launched here and system built here and strengthened in Accra, Ghana. Thank you very much.
I don't think I can add anything after this speech from my Deputy CEO. So what I can say now is a big thank you to all of you for making the time to come at our first roadshow in Ghana. We are looking forward to organize more activities, more awareness, more promotion in Ghana. And again, like I said, on behalf of the CEO of PAPSS, the management of PAPSS, we really thank you. Merci.